Ding dong merrily on high, let all the children suffer. Tom, those are the words, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Welcome to episode 5 of the Strange and Deadly Show. My name is Christopher Clayton and I'm joined by
Tom Elliott.
my good friend Tom Elliott. Merry Christmas, everybody, and Merry Christmas, Tom.
Merry Christmas, Chris, and Merry Christmas, everyone. I do apologise if my voice is a bit deeper than usual. I've been indulging in a bit of Christmas spirit last night, and it's taken its toll, but Merry Christmas. Well, this is our Christmas episode, so we will move on to what we're talking about shortly. But in the meantime, just something of note. We spoke last time about how we got onto the new and noteworthy page on iTunes. And I noticed this time round, after the last episode, we moved to number 21. Now, I don't know how that's measured or what that means, but it was just nice to be there. So thanks for everyone who's downloading us through iTunes and getting us that exposure. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a nice little victory for us, I think, especially as if you look a couple of lines down from where we are, there is a podcast there called Porn and a Donut. Tom, do you have anything to say on the matter?
I don't quite know what to say about that one, Chris.
We seem to be associated with a couple of sex podcasts, don't we? Like we had the Better Sex Workout podcast. We were right next to them. And now we've moved... I think we've moved past them, Tom. I think that they've realised that we are indeed superior. So we've moved past them, but now we've got the Porn and a Donut. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, how did the two correlate?
I think the only way we can get to the bottom of that is I'm going to have to listen to that one.
Mm-hmm. And we'll do a full review of it in the new year.
Absolutely.
Now, we have a double bill for you this week, as we always do. We're back on our themic episodes, of course. Last episode was Brutes and Savages and Pigs, two films that were not connected to each other at all. We just threw them together because we didn't know where else to put them. But this week we're back on our themic journey, as it were. And Tom, do you want to tell the listeners at home what we've got in store for them on this episode?
Well, this being the Christmas episode, the obvious choice was Christmas Evil. But there may be other films on the list that are at Christmas, I'm not too sure. But just looking at them at face value, there isn't really anything else Christmas related. So we went with a sort of occasion-based theme. That's how we're doing this one. And the other film that we're joining with Christmas Evil is Happy Birthday to Me. So... yeah, not the same holiday or same occasion, but I think they fit quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. You could say, for example, something like Silent Night, Deadly Night would fit very well with Christmas Evil, but if it's not on the list, then we can't cover it, I'm afraid, at least not at this point, until we've cleared up the Section 3 list. So we had to go with two films that might kind of fit together quite well. And they both have... Christmas Evil is often thought of as a slasher movie. Now, you and I think we're going to perhaps discuss why that might not be the case, but certainly there are maybe perhaps elements of that in there. And then you have Happy Birthday to Me, so you could also say that they both sort of loosely fit under, certainly in the case of Christmas Evil, under the slasher banner as well. But for the most part, yeah, occasion-based horror is what we're going with, and we're going to start with a film that Tom mentioned that is, I think, perfect for this episode. It's our last show of the year anyway, so you're going to be hearing this just before Christmas. A little film called Christmas Evil from 1980, and I'm going to read my plot summary for this one for you, and then we'll get into reviewing it, telling you what we thought of it. So yeah, Christmas Evil. It was directed and written by Lewis Jackson. It's also known as You Better Watch Out. Christmas Evil tells the story of Harry Stadling, who we first meet as a very young boy witnessing the arrival of Santa Claus via the chimney. He's there with his mother and brother Philip as they look on, Harry not realising that Santa is actually his father, all dressed up. After the boys head to bed, Harry, young and curious, heads back downstairs and happens to see his mother being naughty with Santa. Now, the sight of the two together seems to affect him deeply, and he snaps, throwing a snow globe to the ground. Grrr. That's the kind of noise I make when I throw things, Tom.
Good, okay.
Many years pass by, and we return to Harry as a grown man who also happens to be incredibly enthusiastic about Christmas and about Santa too. He has a habit of spying on the local kids to see if they're being naughty or nice, and he records the information down in his good and bad books. Harry maintains a steady job at Jolly Dream, the local toy factory. He has a clear passion for toys, but he's recently been promoted to a desk job, much to his chagrin, as he'd rather be back on the line helping to put the toys together. At the factory, his co-workers are fairly dismissive of him, and he's cajoled into taking a shift from one of them under a false pretense. He later discovers that this co-worker was actually spending the night at the local pub and considers Harry a schmuck for taking the shift off his hands. Harry's disaffection with the commercialisation of Christmas begins to grow, as he begins to see that the executives running the toy factory care more about manufacturing and money and less about giving toys to children. Already mentally unwell, Harry's sanity begins stretching to breaking point, and the idea of dressing up as Santa isn't merely enough. He wants to become Santa and right the wrongs of the world, giving gifts to children when others would not. So, dressed up as the man himself, he drives in his Christmas van and begins a journey out into the local area that will end up with death and destruction as Harry's grip on the world and on himself gradually loosens.
I really must go now. But now, I want you to remember to stay good boys and girls. Respect your mothers and fathers and do what they tell you. Obey your teachers and learn a whole lot. Now, if you do this, I'll make sure you get good presents from me every year. But if you're bad boys and girls, your name goes in the bad boys and girls book. And I'll bring you something horrible.
So that's the plot for Christmas Evil. I have seen this film before, a couple of times before. Tom, I believe you hadn't. What did you think of this one?
That's right. It was a first for me. I think before I go on to the actual film, I'll just talk about the title for a sec, Christmas Evil. I mean, it's an obvious pun. You know, someone was going to use it one day, but I think the other title fits a bit better, although it doesn't really mean anything as such. You better watch out. But we'll get into it, but I just don't really see Harry as evil. Mentally ill, yes, you know. I don't really see him as evil in the sense of a lot of film killers, you know. So just, you know, a little aside, I suppose.
It seems like, you know, the original title, in fact, was You Better Watch Out. And according to, I think it's on one of the commentary tracks on the DVD release, the Blu-ray release as well, probably I don't have that one. I believe Lewis Jackson, that was his original title, You Better Watch Out, and it was changed. And he didn't even know about it until he actually saw the film upon release. Right. So I think it was changed to Christmas Evil, perhaps to capitalise on the slasher thing. Because it sounds, I can understand why people think that this is a slasher, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. Because of the title, you might associate it with New Year's Evil, for example, which is another sort of fairly well-known slasher movie from the period. So I can understand why they changed it to that. But you're right, I don't think it really quite reflects the character or the story.
That's right. I think if you have the idea in your head of a murderous Santa, it is quite a trashy concept. You immediately think Silent Night, Deadly Night, which is a bit more of a schlocky sort of slash fest, and with a title like Christmas Evil and a killer Santa on the cover, I think you think you're going to get more of the same, but it's not like that at all.
No, not at all. I would actually say, I made this comparison in the last episode when talking about pigs. I actually think this is a better comparison now, one that's more accurate. I sort of compare this a little bit to Maniac.
Yeah, I thought that too. It's like it's more like Maniac light, you know. Yeah. It's not as grimy, not as gruesome, not as heavy going, but in a sense, you're doing the same thing. You're spending time with this guy, and there's times when there's not a lot going on. He's just tinkering around in his life, and we're just watching him. And that's what it's all about. We're spending time with a maniac, and to pull that off in a film, I think your maniac, your killer, your main character needs to have a certain amount of magnetism to keep you watching through those quiet times. And I think our chap here, what's the actor's name?
His name is Brandon Maggot.
Yeah, he pulls it off. He pulls it off really well, to be honest. I think in that respect, where when he's on screen, you're watching him, all these little ticks that he's got going on. I think he does really well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's interesting that where people look at the name and they are prepared to go in and watch a slasher movie, and what you actually get is there are horror elements to the film. Certainly, to me, I've always viewed it, the times that I've seen it, as a sort of a really dark thriller that's really more of a character piece.
Definitely. I mean, let's we'll probably come back to this, but let's start to get stuck into the story. I think if there's one, maybe not a criticism as such, but the thing that tends to stick in my head as being something that could have been done better is possibly the thing that makes Harry sort of flip. You know, He comes down and his dad's dressed as Father Christmas or Santa Claus, and he's just sort of feeling his mum's legs. She's got his suspenders on and his stockings, and he's sort of like, having a little feel and stuff. And I just think, obviously it's confusing for a kid who believes in Father Christmas, but it's not like he walked in and he was pumping away or something behind it or something like that.
No, yeah, I mean it's a fairly tame. I mean, they weren't even really doing anything. For all you know, she might have lost a remote control down her knickers, and he was looking for them. They're not really doing anything except he's rubbing, his wife's leg, somewhat suggestively. But for some reason, like this, just the mere. So I guess Harry believed in Father Christmas so much that it. I mean, there must have been such an unbelievable belief there, that just the idea that his father was actually playing Santa Claus and was, getting off with his mother, somehow that just broke his world apart.
Yeah, I mean, we could hypothesize that maybe there was issues with this kid anyway that we don't know about, and this is sort of just put a particular spin on existing issues, a sort of obsessive personality. I don't know. It's not in the film, but I just think it was quite a tame scene, and they are pretty much telling us that this is what made him flip, and it's like, okay, well, maybe you could have done something a bit more explicit or a bit more shocking than just sort of giggling while Father Christmas rubs your leg,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you watch Maniac, you get the sense that this guy has had an incredibly difficult childhood, and there's something there with his mother that's not right. Whereas this kid, like you say, has come in and has witnessed this, and that seems to send him off. I mean, we do get a little bit of a hint from his brother Philip, played by Jeffrey DeMunn. We'll get into him later. When he says, much later on in the movie, that Harry was always an emotional wreck. So possibly that was. That's some information that we've inherited from him. Possibly he was always like that, and that was just something that triggered some sort of psychosis. But somehow, as we move on through the film, through the early part of it, you would think, well, would this make him hate Christmas? Well, actually, not at all. He actually seems to love Christmas, in fact. Seems to love the image of Santa, seems to love the joy that we get at Christmas time, and he's got decorations up, and he seems like a happy enough guy. But there's always that feeling, isn't there, early on, that there's something not quite right with him.
I do love these scenes, these early scenes where he's going around his business, and for all intents and purposes, he seems all right at first, but he'll do things that, we might, well, I'm not saying we might all do, but things that on first appearances seem normal, but he just takes it that little step beyond. I think there's a scene where he's humming a Christmas song and he starts to hum it really angrily, and stuff like that, or the way you look in the mirror while he's got the shaving foam on his face, and just all these little things where he does something, he's getting excited about Christmas, but he just takes it that one step too far, and it brings a beautiful, unsettling tone to the whole thing, and his performance. I really love it.
Yeah, me too. It's funny because you were saying that he does some things that are normal, but he pushes it too far. He also does some things that are quite abnormal for an adult male. If you're not a child molester, which is standing on his rooftop with a pair of binoculars, spying on children. Now, at first, of course, you look at this and you immediately think, well, there's something extremely creepy about that. I'm not happy about that. But the reason he's actually doing it is not because he's some sort of paedophile or viewing kids in a sexual way. He's doing it because he's taken it upon himself to judge children and their behaviour based on what their activities throughout the day. So one kid, for example, takes the rubbish out for his parents, and he's going to go in the good books because he's done something nice. There's another kid, this little girl that he's extremely fond of, who's always very nice, very sweet. So again, she goes in the good books. But there's this little kid there who's sitting on a bed reading a Penthouse magazine, and he doesn't like this kid, does he, at all? And he goes in the bad book. So even then, you get the sense that this guy he's doing something that nobody should be doing, which is judging another person, judging a kid. But that's quite an abnormal thing to do, isn't it? I mean, did you get a sort of creepy feeling from that?
It's funny. It not once crossed my mind. An adult spying on kids, it does bring to mind kind of, paedophile tendencies and so on. Very creepy in that way. And I think sometimes when we look back at, there's an episode of The Twilight Zone, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, where the two main characters in it are an old man who's actually an alien and a young girl. And to watch it now, it's almost really hard to watch because there's all this innocent stuff going on, where this old man's talking to the girl, but because of the world we live in now, it's just hard to watch because it carries such a different message now, and it's just, you watch it and it's just like, oh no, they didn't just do that.
Yeah.
But I never really got that sense with Harry. There's a purity about him. And when he shouts to the kids across the road and how you doing, and I believe in that kind of purity in his character. So not creepy in that sense, just creepy in the sense of you're clearly insane.
Yeah, I mean, if there is that feeling, I think it goes away pretty quickly.
Yeah. I didn't personally get it, but I can see where you're coming from.
So we're moving through the plot here. We've been introduced to Harry. We can see he's quite a happy guy, but he's clearly, he's working at this factory, Jolly Dream. You can tell there that the people he's working with, his co-workers, they're not very respectful towards him. Particularly this one guy, I can't remember his name actually, didn't write it down, but there's one guy there who basically fobs his shift off onto Harry. Now Harry's initially not too upset with that. He's been promoted to a desk job recently, but he does have this fascination with toys. And he quite likes assembling the toys. They sort of come out on this assembly line. He puts them together. So he takes the job, takes the shift, and finishes that night. And I guess on his way home, he happens to look through the window of this bar as he's on his way. And he sees that guy and some of his co-workers there drinking. Now, this guy said that can you please take the shift? I'm going away with my wife tonight. In actual fact, he wasn't. What he was doing was handing the shift to Harry because he thinks, well, look, I can Harry's an incredibly put upon character. Well, let me put this upon him. He's going to take it. Why would he even question it? He's a schmuck. And this goes back to what you were saying about Harry singing a Christmas song extremely angrily, because he comes home, he sort of picks up this doll, and he's singing this Christmas song, and he just gets incredibly violent with it, incredibly angry, because he knows that people are talking about him behind his back.
That's right. It's also setting up the fact that Harry sees the world in a certain way. Like I say, there is that purity about him, that innocence, and it's just kind of showing you that most of the people in this film aren't actually nice people at all. And I guess it makes us sympathise with Harry because he's not wrong in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you. Let's get into Harry as a character. Is he a sympathetic character?
Absolutely. I do feel for him because he needs help.
Yeah.
He cannot obviously function in day-to-day life, because no one really sees that. His brother says he's, you know, a bit of a loser or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, he's got issues. He needs help. He's never really had that help because he can function in day-to-day life, but he's just slowly unraveling. But he just wants everything to be nice and everyone to be happy. And if they were, he probably never would have ended up killing anyone. He'd have just been wrapped up in the joy of that, you know? I mean, what do you think?
Well, it makes me wonder, up until this point, how did he function as an adult? You know, how did he even make it this far without wanting to go ahead, you know, and kill somebody? It does make you wonder. I think that he's incredibly sympathetic. There's never been a time when I've watched this movie that I haven't felt sorry for him, because I think he means well. But the problem is that the guy clearly is mentally unwell and it does not need to be out in public. Has needed some sort of treatment. I would imagine that I mean, there's never a point in the movie in which we find out if he has ever had any kind of mental treatment in the past. Anything that can psychologically sort of explore him and see what's going on up there. The only thing we know is what we saw at the very beginning of the film and what has led him to this point. There is as you say, there's a purity about him. I mean, there's actually one point where he's looking through the window. Is he looking at the window through at his brother? Is that right? His brother and his wife are having sex?
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure whether it was them or not, or someone else.
Yeah, I can't quite remember, but which is funny. I only watched it again the other day, but in any case, so he's clearly not a sexually motivated character at all. So we know that. No. And yeah, I do think I love a good hard-boiled character piece where it's, you know, we go back to Maniac. Maniac is a lot nastier than this is. This is a little bit shinier in that regard, but it's got that same sort of ominous tone to it that I really like. And I mean, how did you feel about Brandon Maggart as the central character?
Oh, I thought he was great. I think it's a very multi-layered performance, and like I say, I absolutely agree. And you know, we refer to Maniac again, but that sort of magnetism where the character doesn't have to be doing much, but you just want to watch him because he's playing it so well. Yeah. I don't know Brandon Maggart's other work. I've only ever seen him in this, knowingly. But he just disappears into this character, and he doesn't need to be doing much. You just want to watch him because it is such a magnetic performance, like Joe Spinell's performance in Maniac. So, yeah, it is kind of like Maniac light. If you don't like grisly, gritty, explicit films like Maniac, then this is probably a good substitute where you can get the same kind of experience.
Yeah, you're right. If you felt that Maniac was too nasty for you and too grimy and perhaps too grindhousey, I think this would suit you a lot better. I just think Brandon Maggart, like you actually, I don't actually think I've seen him in anything other than this, to be honest, unless I'm just not aware of it if he's been in something and I haven't recognised him. This is really the only thing I know of him in which he's had a lead role. But it's a you've got to have an anchor, somebody who can anchor you to this, and I think he does a brilliant job at it, of making you feel sorry for a guy who at the end of the day is on a warpath, is never going to be, unless he gets treatment, is never ever going to be stable and sane. But you spend so much time with this guy that you've got to have somebody who can carry it well, and I think he does a fantastic job of that myself as well.
He does. He's fascinating to watch, and I guess the film as a whole is it's sort of split up into two parts really. The pre-Santa outfit, and then once he puts that outfit on, and his decline really starts. But in a way, I think I'm not saying the first half is better, but I do love those little ticks, those little things he brings to it. At one point he looks in the mirror and he does that sort of tap on the nose that his dad did when he was a kid, but he just does it just a little bit too hard, and then he sort of wipes his hand over his face and, removes the mask, and just this sort of empty sort of stare left. All these little bits are just fantastic.
Yeah, I absolutely love that bit, actually. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, when he wipes his hand down his face and he's sort of back to being himself again. basically. But yeah, you're right. Two very different halves. Now, I think the second half, the way that it moves, is we begin to pick up the pace. I happen actually to really love the narrative of this one because it's very simple, isn't it? It never. It's not confused at all. It starts from one place and it goes towards the end, and there's a very natural kind of, for his character, a very natural kind of descent that happens gradually. You're watching a man losing his mind, basically. I love the fact that it's very clean all the way through. There's really nothing that happens that that's so overly ambitious that it distracts you from the thrust of the film, which is this guy is losing his mind. Now he's lost his mind, and out he goes into the world. What he actually does is he ends up gluing a beard to his face. He can't pull the beard off anymore. And it does seem like at this point, I wonder if you agree with me, that he basically considers himself to be Santa Claus at this point, has transformed into that character completely.
I think he does. And it's funny, he doesn't... I don't think he actually goes out with the intention of killing anyone at this point, although he has fashioned those soldiers, which are a bit lethal. But he does go out and he steals a load of toys from the factory and takes them to the kids' hospital and stuff like that. He goes to a party and and he's dancing with people. He does sort of go out to spread joy. He doesn't go out with the intention of killing anyone. It's only that some people sort of, if anyone rains on his parade, so to speak, if anyone doesn't accept that joy graciously, then that's where things kind of go wrong.
Yeah, the thing is though, Tom, it all of the people who he does kill in the movie, they're all incredibly unpleasant and snobby for the most part. So we have this. He's going out. He gives presents to this, gives a bunch of gifts he's got in his van, his Christmas van that he's painted up, which might be a bit creepy, driving around in your Christmas van like Santa Claus. And don't forget, at this point, he's doing the on Dancer, on Prancer, he's has very much become Santa Claus, really, if Santa Claus was driving a white van around. And so he gives gifts to this children's hospital, and then he has the idea to park up outside a church. And inside this church are two of the people who are sort of executives behind the factory that he works at. And he's incredibly disaffected with the whole thing. I guess he's waiting for them to come out so that he can... I wonder what he was trying to do. Do you think he was trying to hurt that one guy?
I mean, I guess it goes contrary to what I said before. Maybe he was going out with the intention of hurting them, because he did have the soldiers with the lethal kind of spike on it. So it's a possibility, and he does seem to try and get past these other people. And I watched it again today. So someone puts a hand on him to stop him while they are sort of making fun of him. So he obviously went there for a reason. And I guess he was going to hurt them or something, I don't know. But it's the other ones who get it in the end.
Yeah, it's a small group of idiots, snobby idiots, who for some reason decide to make fun of Santa Claus. Who does that? But
I know, it is a bit broad, this scene, the way... how posh they are and the way they're just so brutal towards him.
Yeah, for no reason at all. I mean, he's standing there outside a church. I think most people would be okay with that, but for some reason they're making fun of him, and he snaps. And this is am I right in thinking this is the first time that he finally completely loses it? He take one of these toys that you mentioned with the sword sticking out, and this is the first time we see any real graphic violence, and he shoves the sword. Shoves the toy with the sword piece sticking out into the guy's eye, and we see it graphically. And then he takes a sort of toy axe and whacks it into a couple of their heads and kills, I don't know, about 3 or 4 people, and then gets into the van and buggers off.
That's right. Not it was quite graphic, I suppose, but like we said earlier, it's quite tame, I think, in its violence. It's not really what this is about. I mean, we're in 1980 here, and it sort of taps into what you said before about the title change being done to more capitalize, sell it as a slasher. We're in 1980 again. We said it last time or the time before. Friday the 13th, Halloween. let's put Christmas Evil on it, so we're sort of tempting people in with the whole holiday horror sort of aspect to it, where it doesn't really fit.
When I look on the internet for this movie, look up information about it on Wikipedia, on IMDb, everybody calls it a slasher movie. I don't see it as a slasher movie. How do you feel about it?
No, I wouldn't call it a slasher either. It's a character piece. It's a character study. It's barely a horror film, you know? Only the fact that people get killed in it, sort of in the last third of the film, makes it a horror film, I suppose. But it's, yeah, I wouldn't put it in the slasher category personally.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I've never considered this to be a slasher. I actually, the first time I saw this movie, they've got those sets in. I guess they've got them in England as well. I don't know, but in America they've got they used to have these sets of DVDs that had about 50 horror movies on them.
Oh, yeah.
You know the ones, and you would basically they would be spread over a bunch of discs. Most of them were absolutely awful. I remember that, and I bought a set in America anyway, and it had Christmas Evil on it. It also had Deep Red on it, the classic Dario Argento film, which I believe we're getting to at some point. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it's on the Section 3 list or not. But
I know Suspiria is. I think it's Deep Red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, and I remember that's where I first saw it. Cut. Well, Deep Red was cut anyway, badly cut, horrible print quality and everything. But I remember when I first watched it, I was a little bit disappointed because I expected it to be a slasher based on the name, and it really isn't. I would say it's more of a thriller, really, a sort of a thriller and a great solid central character. It's a character piece.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Because it's interesting in this last third as well. He's going out trying to spread joy. I like the party scene as well, where he's outside looking into this Christmas party, and looks like someone's office do or something, and they come and bring him in, and he's actually a good Santa. You know, he gets the place going. He dances around. He speaks to the kids. But he does that thing again where he's doing this beautiful job of, getting the party going, and he's saying to the kids, you've all got to be good, and I'll come and see you every year. But if you're bad,
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what it says, but he just pushes it that bit too far, and everyone sort of just stops for a moment until he says Merry Christmas, something like that. But it's him all over, just taking things that little bit too far.
Yeah, I mean, it's nicely weighted up until that moment, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the scales are tipping a little bit here. And in fact, there's actually a woman, I don't know if you noticed, immediately after he does that, who looks slightly uncomfortable, which I don't know if that was I guess it was the intention to sort of say that even this woman is like, oh, I don't know, this guy's a bit weird, isn't he? But what's funny is, if I remember correctly, he goes into this party after he's killed those people outside the church. So he's just murdered a bunch of people, and then he's standing outside listening to the Christmas music, looking in through the window, and they bring him in there, and he sort of. And when I first saw this movie, I thought, oh dear, no, you don't want to do it. There's going to be a bloodbath here, and it's anything but. He gets into the jovial spirit, and then he goes back outside, and all of a sudden he's Santa Claus on the run, as it were.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like we spoke about before. As long as everyone's having a good time, as long as everyone's happy, as long as everyone sort of loves and respects him as Father Christmas, he's fine. He's still got these little mad twitches here and there, like when he says to the kids. But as long as everyone's happy, he's happy.
Yeah, and I want to believe in him, Tom. I want to believe that he can make it through this. I want to believe that he can somehow become a normal person afterwards, even if that means putting him in a hospital. I still want to believe that he's going to make it and he's going to be okay.
Yeah, I do too. But I guess we're sort of at our final run now, aren't we, where word's getting out about there's a killer Santa on the loose, and Harry, he's speaking to some kids, and their parents kind of see that there's blood on his costume, and it's Santa on the run, and nothing's really going to be the same from here on in. I mean, how do you feel about how it all wraps up?
Well, I thought it wrapped up the only way that it could, really, which was that I think we get to a point where we realise, like you say, what happens is that he meets up with these kids in sort of, I guess, in like an alleyway. and they're with their parents, and their parents are staying away from him because they've heard about this killer Santa Claus who's on the loose. It's been on the news. There's been a news reporter who's been telling everybody about it with a tremendous moustache, by the way, Tom. We're always on the lookout for those, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely.
And the parents, one of the guys in there immediately says, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy who's been killing people. And the kids are incredibly protective of Harry. They believe in Santa 100%, no doubt about it. And so you get this interesting scene where this guy, one of the fathers, the father of the little blonde girl who Harry is infatuated with. Again, not in a creepy way. She's very, very sweet, very, very loving. But anyway, her father comes forward and tries to attack Harry with a knife, and you get the scene of Harry escaping from that and running away. And now Harry is on the run and it's almost like something out of an old Hammer horror movie where you've got a bunch of people with lit torches and pitchforks looking for Harry, and he's trying to run away. And really, I mean, you're already thinking at this point, how on earth? I think at this point he's gone too far. He's not going to be able to get away with this. What actually happens is he makes his way over to Philip's house. Now, we haven't talked too much about Philip, but basically a couple of times through the movie we sort of flash back over to Harry's brother Philip. We see him as a child at the beginning of the movie. Now, he's a fairly normal guy. He's got 2 kids, got a wife. He's been worried about Harry because Harry normally comes over for Christmas, hasn't shown up at all. And Harry's wondering, well, where is he? What's happened to him? Harry ends up turning up at Philip's place. And they have an argument, don't they? And something happens at that point. Philip snaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Philip, his role isn't that pivotal in the whole thing, I don't think. I think he's there to just add a bit of backstory to Harry that, says he's always been a kind of, he's always a screw-up, that kind of thing. He's there to add a bit of colour to Harry's past, but he's not really that pivotal to the whole plot. But yeah, he snaps and he ends up strangling Harry. I'm not quite sure what he intends to do because he drags him out into his van and sits him in the seat. Yeah. So was he going to sort of try and get away with it? Like, I don't quite know, but Harry gives him a good old punch out the window, and that's the end of Philip.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not the end of Philip because he gets back up.
He does, yeah.
But yeah, I've got a feeling that Philip obviously snapped. My feeling was that when he's dragging him outside to put him in the van, he hears that all these townspeople are coming, and he probably thinks, okay, well, look, I'll put him in the van, and when they turn up, I'll say, look, here he is. Here's the guy, and they can do whatever they want with him, and basically they get the blame for it.
Could be.
I think that, but it doesn't happen. Harry ends up waking up. I guess he thought he'd strangled him to death, but he hadn't. He just, he'd passed out momentarily, and gives Harry a good old punch, boom, knocks him down on the ground, and takes off in the van. And Philip goes running after him. All the townspeople are chasing the van as well, and Harry ends up driving off this sort of like a what would you call it?
Sort of like an overpass or something, some sort of bridge.
Yeah, and what happens from that point onwards is something that confuses a lot of people. It confused me the first time I saw the movie. I've since gone back and seen the movie a couple of times. The ending shot of the movie, basically, is Harry's van flying and taking off into the night sky as if it was Santa on his sleigh.
Yeah. I love this ending, to be honest. I have read stuff online. I was, going through IMDb comments and stuff, just having a little look. And it does seem to confuse some people, but I really like it. And incidentally, the film gets less than 5 out of 10 on IMDb on the average rating, so I'll say something about that in a minute. But yeah, I really like it because we know in reality Harry's ended up dead at the bottom of whatever that bridge is or something. He's went off that bridge and died, but in Harry's head, when he launches off that bridge, he flies away like Santa, but it's Harry's, we're sort of getting a glimpse into Harry's sort of insanity at that point, and I think it's a great ending.
Yeah, because what it says to me is that Harry won, really, at the end of the day. You know, you can say that he's done a lot of bad things, and indeed he has, but at the end of the day, his goal was to spread joy to the children, and he certainly has done that. I have to say that it can be confusing, because we've actually got a piece of feedback which we'll read later on towards the end of the show, where someone's asking us, you know, they were quite confused by the ending and they wanted us to explain it. Tom, you actually explained it there. A lot of people miss it, but when because Philip's been chasing after the van, there's one point where Philip sort of falls down this little hill. If you actually listen when he's falling down the hill, you can actually hear the van crashing and exploding. But it's because he's rolling down the hill and sort of banging into things. I think a lot of people confuse that as being the noise that he's making as he rolls down the hill, but it actually isn't. You go back and listen to it, you can actually hear, when you know what to listen out for, you can hear very clearly that the van has gone boom, crash, and has exploded. So what it's supposed to be is just a very surrealistic ending, basically.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I haven't looked at the IMDb comments because some of them are absolutely poisonous about anything. Somebody would excuse a bad film for anything. I'm quite sad actually that this film has such a low IMDb rating, because I think it's got a great ending. I think it's a great central character. To me, it's, you were talking in the last episode about pigs being a sort of, you know, kind of underrated, undiscovered gem. I can't say this is undiscovered for me because I've seen it before, but I think this is a real gem.
I think it's... I said halfway there for pigs. But I think this is the first one from the list so far that I do think is a gem. It's which is what I wanted. You know, it was always a bit of a voyage of discovery, and this is the one that I think holds up really well. I was never bored with it. I enjoyed it all the way through. I'd go so far as to say, of the films we've watched so far, this is my favourite. And you know, that's not saying much when you've got Brutes and Savages on the list and White Cannibal Queen, but there's also some Cronenberg films on there. But this one, I really liked it. And it's funny, really, the writer-director doesn't seem to have been prolific at all, but he's done a lovely job with this one. I love it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how you do sometimes get those directors who only ever do one or two things, but they end up making a movie that everybody remembers. As it turns out, I still think this is one that, because of the title, I think people have a preconceived notion of what it might be. And let me just tell you, I mean, Tom and I have explained it anyway. It really isn't a slasher movie. It's a great character piece. Don't miss it just because you look at the name Christmas Evil and you think New Year's Eve, and you think, well, it must be some cheesy slasher. It really isn't. It's a good little strong, ominous, moody, sort of grim horror movie. And horror movie, yes, you know, more of a thriller. It's got horror elements to it. It's tied for me at the moment with Scanners, because I think Scanners is a bit of a classic, but I think this is a cult classic as well. I think it deserves to be seen by more people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's you mentioned the Blu-ray release with some commentaries, which I plan on getting because I'd love to hear more about it. I understand the actor Brandon Maggott's on the commentary, is he?
He is, yeah. It's interesting. Well, I've actually got some trivia, and we can kind of put those 2 points together. Infamous cult movie director John Waters, of course, we know from Pink Flamingos and other stuff that I can't remember now. Pink Flamingos, and what else did he do?
Oh, I can't remember.
No, but anyway, but you know, look, everybody knows John Waters. Incredibly funny guy, great personality. He considers Christmas Evil to be his favourite Christmas movie of all time. He's previously recorded a commentary alongside director Lewis Jackson, which is on the Blu-ray and on the DVD copy I've got from Synapse. He, believe it or not, John Waters actually holds annual screenings of the movie, presumably at Christmas time. Let me tell you about Brandon Maggott, or is it Maggart? So I'm saying Maggot. Lead actor Brandon Maggott has spawned a rather notable figure in music, Tom. He's the father of singer-songwriter Fiona Apple. The whole family is rather musical and is also involved in various forms of entertainment. I've heard a few Fiona Apple tracks now and again. I know she's kind of fairly big in America, isn't she?
I don't really know her, to be honest. I mean, I looked up Brandon Maggott just out of interest, and he's 81 now. He actually looks like Father Christmas. He's got a big white beard on him.
Right.
But he's an interesting guy. He's a writer now. He's got a couple of books under his belt, and he's a painter as well. So he seems to have retired from acting, but he does these other things. So yeah, quite an interesting fella.
Well, this sort of slots into the point you were making about Brandon Maggart, which is that according to the commentary that Lewis Jackson recorded alongside John Waters, Brandon Maggart was actually not a fan of the movie and had moral qualms about it. Now,
Really?
yeah. Now it seems like that must have changed because he ended up recording a commentary track for it. I've never heard his commentary track, so I'd be interested to hear that. So maybe he's had a change of mind over the years. It happens.
Yeah. Well, I hope so, because he'd done a stellar job on it, and I'd like to think that he likes what he did with it at least.
If you think Harry's brother Philip looks rather familiar, it's probably because he's played by actor Jeffrey DeMunn, who came to much more prominence later in his career as Peacemaker Dale in The Walking Dead. Now, this time around, watching it again for the third time, I was looking at him and thinking, I know that guy. I recognise that guy because he's a very expressive actor. And I had to look him up immediately. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Dale from The Walking Dead. Of course, the first few times I'd seen it, The Walking Dead didn't exist as a TV show. Did you?
Of course. Yeah.
You're a fan of The Walking Dead, aren't you, Tom?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's funny. I watched it and I recognised his face, but I didn't pay it much thought, to be honest. And it's only when we were chatting earlier that it is the guy from The Walking Dead. I didn't put the two together.
I think it's because we're so used to him. Obviously now he's a lot older and he's grey, and we're used to watching him, looking at him with that safari hat on, that we don't, we're not used to it. But yeah, that's Jeffrey DeMunn. And finally, one final bit of trivia here: Kathleen Turner had originally auditioned for the role of Harry's sister-in-law, but was turned down. So that would have been interesting, wouldn't it, to have seen her in that?
I suppose it wasn't the biggest part, but I'm sure she didn't lose much sleep over it later on.
So if you want to get it, the film was released on Blu-ray back in November from Vinegar Syndrome. It's a 4K restoration, and it comes with a number of extras, including, most notably, commentary tracks with director Lewis Jackson, fan John Waters, of course, the infamous director, and actor Brandon Maggart. It's also available on DVD from Synapse, which is the version I have. I'm not entirely sure, Tom, if the Blu-ray is a region-free thing.
Right.
So I'll need to look into it for you. So obviously I can't tell you guys. I really should have looked into that before I started recording. I would love to get that release if it is, though, because it sounds a 4K restoration. I think it's one that's worth keeping, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I'll also add as well, I'm a bit of a vinyl enthusiast. I'm not a hipster, but I do like... I do like. There's a few companies doing it now, like Death Waltz Recording in the UK, Waxwork Records, I think, a few of them. But Death Waltz Recording have just released the soundtrack on vinyl. Now, I didn't actually get it, to be honest, because I think the soundtrack it's fine for the movie. I'm just not sure it's something I would sit and listen to. It doesn't really stick out to me as that sort of soundtrack. But if that's your thing, if you did like it, then that's there as well.
So that was Christmas Evil. Now, Thomas Elliot, he's the man with the plan, and he's got a van, but there are no children in it as far as we know. Tom, tell me about this nonsense. Happy birthday to me.
Okay, happy birthday to me. 1981. We seem to spend a lot of time in 1981. Directed by J. Lee Thompson, written by John Saxton, Peter Jobin, and Timothy Bond. The film opens with a classic stalk and slash sequence as Bernadette, a member of Crawford Academy's elite clique, the Top 10, struggles to escape a largely unseen killer. Still, almost escape she does until she meets someone familiar to her, but not to us, and takes a razor blade to the throat. So, with one member of the Top 10 down, we move on and meet the rest of them, and our main character, Virginia Ginny Cartwright, played by Melissa Sue Anderson, a new member and a popular student at the school. Her best friend Anne, played by Tracy E. Bregman, seems protective of her and also is part of the Top 10. Ginny has seemingly settled down in the local town with her father Harold, played by Lawrence Dane. Ginny's got an interesting past, one which is slowly revealed through the course of the film. She's had experimental brain surgery, which we discover is related to a car accident she was in alongside her mother. Initially unaware of the procedure, throughout the film she begins to remember key moments from her past and from the operation. She seeks the help of her doctor, David Faraday, played by Glenn Ford, who helps her to make sense of the memories that are coming back to her. Meanwhile, there's a black-gloved killer prowling around the top 10 group, picking them off one by one. A French student, Etienne, meets a grisly end when his face is pushed into the spokes of a whirring motorcycle. A jock, Greg, has his neck crushed by the killer while weightlifting. So who is this mysterious killer? The finger seems to point to several suspects, including the weirdest member of the group, Alfred, who has a fetish for gory makeup effects. However, when Alfred is killed at the local graveyard and a good-natured student is violently murdered with a shish kebab, the killer is shown both times to be Ginny. She wakes up being unable to remember the previous night in both cases. As the members of the top 10 are being whittled down, Ginny herself seems convinced that she is the one committing the murders. Could the brain surgery have contributed to the blackouts, or is there another explanation that might account for the bodies that sit at the table for Ginny's birthday as the movie nears its conclusion? Perhaps a shocking twist lies in store that will change the outcome of events forever.
Can't live in the past, honey.
Daddy, I have to remember. David says until I stop repressing what happened, I won't be completely cured. He says I'm progressing very quickly.
Ginny, we've been happy together. I don't want any of those memories to change that. God, sometimes I wish we'd never moved back here.
I love this house. I like living here. I like my school. I like my friends. Please don't take that away from me.
If this is where you want to live, this is where we'll live.
This is where I want to be.
Case closed.
So, happy birthday to me. Chris, are you happy with this one?
Well, not especially, Tom. I think there's potential here. I've seen this movie before, by the way. I've seen it once before. I think there's a potential here. One word I think I would use for this to sort of sum it up. I'm going to actually review the movie, but to kind of sum it up with one word, I would say confused is that word. I think it's a decent slasher. I think it's well made. I think it's reasonably well acted. The director of the movie, we've got to talk about him in a little bit, because you would be quite surprised actually by this guy's previous work. It's a director of some note, I would say that. But I think the biggest problem with this movie is that it's overly ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
It wants to do things that I think are they're too convoluted for a slasher movie. Now, I have to give it credit for trying something different. We'll sort of explain what all of this means a bit later on. I just think that they were trying too much. There were problems with this movie during production anyway, which we'll also talk about. I think there were changes that were made while they were filming that make this film far less effective than it should be.
I can see exactly what you're saying, and I agree. I think what I would say one of its major strengths is, I suppose, and this was quite apparent from the get-go, I think in terms of the way it's filmed, the way it looks, the quality of it, the sort of substance in that way is a cut above probably 90% of the slashers or more of that time. It seems to me, and the fact that J. Lee Thompson is such a noted director is what probably accounts for this. It seems to me of a film from a different age almost, in the way it looks and it's made, but then it's sort of also an 80s slasher. So it sort of straddles these two worlds, I mean, that initial death in the car was like, I was watching it and the music was going, it was like something out of an old Hitchcock movie or something. It in terms of the quality of how it's made, I think it is better than most slashers, but that doesn't necessarily mean it accomplishes what a good slasher should, because I agree with you, the story itself I found a cut above nonsense, just it was almost nonsense. I could see what was going on and everything, but it was just like, what, really? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you can't fault the production of this and the way it's made. I mean, we might as well get into talking about, before we get into the plot of it, let's talk about J. Lee Thompson for a minute, because I think he's important here.
Yeah.
We said he's a notable director. The reason he's quite a strange pick for a slasher movie. He's previously directed a number of classic films, including 1961's The Guns of Navarone and 1962's Cape Fear, both hugely acclaimed movies, classic part of old Hollywood. He also directed 2 films in the Planet of the Apes series. I'm a big fan of those original movies.
Oh, me too. Love them.
I would actually say, I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with me, I actually love all of them. Even though you could argue that some of the later ones are not that great. The original is always going to be considered the best. But he directed Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, released in 1972 and 73 respectively. So immediately here, this is not some hack director. And I think this is what makes it a major cut above Final Exam and Graduation Day, where they look like they're made by directors who are sort of fairly new to the scene. This one, I think, it's got a sheen to it, hasn't it? A certain kind of quality and texture that is, I would even say, puts it above, in terms of the production quality, above even, Friday the 13th.
Oh, definitely. You can tell that this is a seasoned sort of, I hate to use the term, old school sort of director, classic director, rather than the sort of schlockier ones who are making films that this gets lumped with. He's got talent that far exceeds theirs in some ways, but it perhaps means he's maybe not the right man for the job in other ways. I mean, it's interesting. He has this great pedigree, but towards the end of his career, he directed some of the Death Wish movies. Now, I'm a big fan of the first 2 Death Wish movies. Yeah. The later ones were getting a bit silly, and I think he directed 1 or 2 of them, and he also directed a lot of the Death Wish knockoffs that Charles Bronson was making at the time. Yeah. So it seems that his career maybe took a bit of a downturn near the end, which is sad, but, I don't mind a bit of Charles Bronson, schlock either. But yeah, so I think the thing that makes it look that good, and like you say, that sheen is definitely there, is also the thing that makes him maybe not the right man for the job in other ways. But I don't know, you can't fault him. I think the fault with this is probably the script.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that as we sort of explore the plot here, because there were script issues that got in the way of this. And I think, like I was saying when I first started talking about this, I think there's the potential there for something really good. I think what's one of the major problems I have with this is it's too long. I think that a slasher, there are exceptions, but I think a slasher needs to be around 90 minutes or so, and it needs to be quite punchy. This is actually almost 2 hours long. I think it's about an hour and 50 minutes. I think it's too long. I thought, towards the end, they're stretching it out. And I think that's what happens when you have a script, which, as it turns out, was rewritten a number of times while they were filming. So already there, there's a problematic thing there. But let's get into the plot of it. So we've talked about Bernadette. She's killed off at the beginning of the movie. You were saying that it's something kind of like something out of Hitchcock. And I really like that scene. It almost reminded me as well of sort of an old 70s giallo.
I agree.
So we're introduced to Virginia Ginny Cartwright, played by Melissa Sue Anderson. Now, Melissa Sue Anderson actually at this point was quite famous in America. She had a role in Little House on the Prairie, which my mother used to watch the hell out of. And I never did, because it didn't appeal to me whatsoever. Have you ever seen any of it?
I've never seen it, no.
But she was apparently, one of the main cast members in there. How do you feel about Melissa Sue Anderson as a sort of the lead, the central role here?
She was fine, She is, again, probably a cut above a lot of, I was going to call her the final girl. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that really fits the bill this time. It kind of does, but she's a cut above a lot of them in terms of her acting ability, and it goes hand in hand with, the director being who he is and the quality he brings to it. This first section is her going about her school life, and I think and she's discovering these memories that are coming back to her of her accident and her brain surgery and stuff like that. So all this is sort of going on with her friends, who are just, I found to me, the most thoroughly unlikable group, going, but not only unlikable, but annoying. They annoyed me.
Well, the thing is, this group, they're called the Top 10. And basically, it's a group that's comprised of rich kids. That's what it is. And they're snobby. And, so I think that makes them inherently unlikable. Apart from, I think Ginny is quite likable. The problem that you have here is based on the script decisions. It's quite hard. I mean, it might sound like I'm trying to feel my way around this. It's quite difficult to get into the plot of it because it's going off in different directions. There are, I want to talk about the script issues, and I will when we get towards the actual end of the plot, because it'll make more sense as to why we saw the ending that we did. But there are scenes in here where it's quite clear to me that Ginny, her character was meant to go a certain way that they then changed towards the end.
My annoyance with the characters sort of goes beyond who they are as well. I just found them unpleasant to watch, to the point where, I think another time I might have just turned it off because they just annoyed me so much. And I don't get some of their actions, and it's not that I just don't get them. I don't quite understand them either.
Yeah.
There's this scene in a bell tower where there's this male guy, I can't remember his name, but he pulls a knife out and he's sort of trying to scare Ginny with it. And I think we're supposed to think that she dies, but she doesn't. And it's all getting very confusing. But I couldn't tell whether she was supposed to be imagining this, or is he just such a dick that he pulls a knife on his friends for a laugh? Because it seems to keep happening, these things, like the guy with the severed head earlier on who tried to fool his friends. They do stupid things, and I just don't understand why.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the reason this is happening is because, first of all, it's supposed to be a whodunit. So the killer in the movie, who's picking off members of the Top 10, is this sort of an unseen killer, very much the standard thing at that time. This is before we start getting into masks and things like that. It's just an unseen killer with a pair of black gloves on. I think that they were trying to do this thing of giving us red herrings and suspects. So you've got near the beginning of the movie, Alfred, the guy you were talking about with the severed head, is this weird kid. It doesn't make sense at all why he would be in this social clique when he's clearly a massive weird nerd. Doesn't really make sense why he's there in the first place. He scares the two girls, Ginny and Anne, with a severed head that's made to look like Bernadette, who has gone missing.
Yeah.
So you've got him. Early on in the film, you've got Etienne, the French student, who ends up climbing into Ginny's window and steals a pair of her panties, I guess. And then so
he was an arsehole as well.
He meets a rather grisly end, though, I have to say. So you've got him. Then you've got the guy you were talking about. I can't remember his name either, but he's the one who's playing soccer in the game. He's very competitive. Yeah. So he pulls a knife out for no reason. Then you've got, in flashback scenes, her mother, which I honestly think they meant to make you believe that it was possible her mother survived the drowning.
Right.
Because she's so angry that her daughter can't get into the birthday party of this guy that she had an affair with, and we'll get around to explaining why that's so important. So I think you're meant to believe that all these different people could be the killer. The problem is that I think it's just not done very well. I think it's really confusing. Like there's no explanation at all for why this guy up in the bell tower is suddenly incredibly maniacal, and then later on we find out he's still alive and he was playing a joke, and all of a sudden now I'm the jovial guy out there playing soccer. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, that's it. They are trying to set up these red herrings, but there's no subtlety there. It's just everyone just does stupid things that a killer would do, and that's what it's all about. It's it's nonsense.
Yeah, it's some of the worst sort of foreshadowing the red herring kind of thing that I've seen for a while. I think. What about the violence in the movie, Tom? I mean, it should be. It's a slasher movie. There are violent scenes in there that make me think that perhaps I believe the film was made before Friday the 13th, or it was in production while that other film was being made. So it wasn't necessarily capitalizing on Friday the 13th. But I think there are elements of that in there. How do you feel about the violence that's here?
I think it's quite artfully done. You mentioned it reminds you of a giallo earlier on, and I think I actually quite like the kills, and there's a lot of details there that are a lot of flourishes that remind me of some good giallos too. I mean, the whole thing is quite giallo-esque in terms of the kills, a bonkers plot. I mean, we accept some bonkers plots in Italian movies all the time. So I think the kills are really artfully done. There's usually a detail in each of them that sort of makes it quite unique, quite nice. The Waits kill was good, or I can't really. It's about a week since I've seen it now, so I wish I could go into more detail. But I do remember sitting watching them at the time, thinking that when a kill did happen, even though they're spaced out quite more than they should be, that they were nicely done.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I do think that, I mean, they're very quick cut. That's the only thing. They sort of, the kills are there and then they're not. Like, they flash away quite quickly. Now, if you go to the website hysterialives.co.uk, it's a great website for slasher movies, and they have many articles on there. I remember at one point, many, many years ago, I was reading an article about My Bloody Valentine, which is one of my favourite sort of obscure slashers. It's a Canadian slasher made in the same year, actually, 1981. And the guy on there, I can't remember his name, I think it's Justin Kurzweil is the guy who runs that site. He was doing some research in a great article talking about all this stuff that was cut out of My Bloody Valentine. And it's so fantastic. Many years later, that footage that was excised ended up being found, and they released a fantastic Blu-ray that includes the uncut footage. Now, the uncut footage looks very different to the normal footage, but it's still you can watch a version of the film where it's got it inserted in there, and it's fantastic. And he's got an article on there about Happy Birthday to Me, and it seems like at some point, now we don't know for sure, there are stills on that website where a couple of the kills are much more graphic than what we actually see in the movie, particularly the one with the Etienne getting the killer sort of shoves his scarf into the whirring motorcycle wheel, and it pulls his face into the wheel, and it's much more graphic, this picture. If you ever get a chance, either yourself, Tom, or anybody who's listening to this, go and have a look at the pictures. It seems like the deaths were intended to be more graphic. Now, whether the reason this article was made, because they were wondering, was there any footage that was cut out that maybe we can find? That it may just be that these were professional stills that were taken. They do that sometimes on sets, and perhaps they never even film those scenes. But it does. I think this film could have stood out a bit more if those, if the fully graphic death scenes had been left in. The problem is the MPAA at that time, they were so strict in America. I don't think those kills would ever have made it in. The way they were. But go and have a look at that article if you can, because it's quite fascinating to see, especially the motorcycle death. It's pretty graphic.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'll look out for that. It is one of many things, I think, that, like we said earlier, the film just seems to straddle two worlds and not be particularly comfortable in either of them. And that's probably one of the main issues. I mean, shall we get to the sort of climax now, do you think?
Yeah, let's get to the climax. We've been watching Ginny. We've been seeing that she's having flashbacks related to her past. She's been in this car accident alongside her mother. She's ended up having this brain surgery. Now, up until a certain point in the movie, we've been under the illusion that there's some unseen killer out there, and we've got the various suspects. And then something happens Ginny's in a graveyard paying respects to her mother. She's laying down flowers. Alfred comes in there, and they want to make you think that Alfred might be pulling a knife out of his pocket. In actual fact, he's pulling a flower out of his pocket to give to her. And Ginny kills Alfred with a knife. And we see that it's Ginny. Later on, there's another guy named Steve, another who's actually played by what is this guy's name? Because I've seen him in a bunch of things. Matt Craven, who's a very recognisable character actor in TV shows in America. He ends up, sort of hooking up with Ginny, and she cooks him a couple of shish kebabs. And I think you know this scene. This is actually, believe it or not, this is the kill that is the best remembered kill from the movie. It's whenever anyone talks about this movie, they always talk about this scene because it was on the box art on the VHS tape. The box art was a guy getting a shish kebab shoved into his mouth. As it turns out, the guy on the cover is not the same guy who's in the movie. And Ginny, they're sort of playing around with each other, kissing, and she takes a shish kebab and she shoves it violently into his throat, which is probably my favourite kill in the movie. It's very quick, but and we see that it's Ginny. So now Ginny has killed 2 people. Or has she? What we're made to think is that, well, what's happening here? Is Ginny killing people and then having blackouts, waking up and not remembering that she's killed people? Now, this is where we come to the climax, and this is where we can start to sort of talk about the issues with the script. I read some information on Wikipedia. You have to take it with a grain of salt. This will all make sense when we explain the ending to you. According to Wikipedia, this film was originally scripted to have a different ending than the one we see. Now, a script on the Retro Slashers website seems to indicate that the original plan was to have Virginia as the killer all along. But this ending was changed somewhat late in production as the filmmakers felt the original ending wasn't climactic enough. So the script was rewritten even while filming. I think this is the key issue. Let's explain the climax, Tom. Let's sort of get into that, and then I'll tell you why I have a problem with this and why the script issues I feel is perhaps the biggest problem here. The climax of the movie is all the people who've been killed laid out around a table. They're all sitting there, and Ginny's father comes home. He's been away on a business trip. He's played by the in my opinion, the great Lawrence Dane, who you probably remember from Scanners. He played Keller in that, one of the villains in there. And he comes home and he sees all these dead bodies around there, and Ginny comes out with a birthday cake, and she ends up murdering her father. So at this point we're thinking, okay, well, obviously Ginny's the killer. At some point they decided to rewrite the ending to the movie. I think this ending is absolute nonsense. I think it is just... anything that's good about the movie is not completely taken away, but I think much of the goodwill I have towards this is taken away just by how absolutely nonsensical this whole thing is.
Definitely. I'll give it this. I liked when she walked into this sort of little annex, this little house or something that is on her dad's land, this little separate piece, and all the dead people are there, sort of the guests to the party that she had who never came, and it makes sense. She was let down all these years earlier. She was unpopular at school. She threw this party, nobody came. She's went mad, killed all these people, all their friends, and brought her to her party. Simple, fine. Yeah. It works. The image of them all sitting around the table in various states of death is good, and it creates a nice sort of image, but then it all just goes bonkers. And I'll be honest with you, mate, I didn't have a clue what was going on. There's Ginny, and then another Ginny walks in and says that she's her twin sister or something.
Well, what actually happens is that we've seen that Ginny's killed all these people and her father, and then so Ginny walks sort of along the table, and she lifts up the head of somebody who's on the table, who we think is Anne, because she's dressed in the same outfit as Anne. And as it turns out, Ginny is actually on the table, is sitting on a chair, at the table. So now all of a sudden we've got 2 Ginnies. There's a Ginny that's at the table, and there's a Ginny standing up. They're both played by Melissa Sue Anderson, of course. And so at this point we're thinking, okay, I remember when I first saw this movie, I thought, okay, well, obviously it's an evil twin sister. And she's been a secret twin sister she knew nothing about. I actually think that would have been better than what we get. But what we do get is that they have a struggle. Ginny wakes up and the other Ginny, they have a struggle. And the real Ginny grabs at fake Ginny's face and pulls away a latex mask. And underneath it is Anne, her best friend, who we've previously seen drowned in a bathtub, so we presume she's dead. Now, this must be the most magical latex mask ever made, Tom, because not only can you look exactly like somebody, you can sound exactly like them, you can inherit the shape of their body, everything. So it turns out that Anne has apparently been wearing this magical latex mask. She's been going around pretending to be Ginny. What she's been doing is using chloroform to knock Ginny out and then killing people pretending to be Ginny so she can frame her. The reason she's doing this is because Ginny's mother had sex with her father. I'm guessing her father gave Ginny's mother a baby, which turned out to be Ginny. Therefore, they're half sisters. But because of Anne's father's, because of Anne's father's affair, Anne's family broke apart. And therefore she's so upset that she has to pretend to be another woman and look exactly like her and kill all of her friends. I just think it's rubbish. And I'll explain why it's rubbish. The reason it's rubbish is because it seems like I was saying before, based on the original script, the filmmakers intended for Virginia to be the killer all along. And what happened was they felt that the original ending, it wasn't good enough, it wasn't dramatic enough. So what happened was, while they were filming the movie, they rewrote the ending to make it seem like more of a twist, which it does. It just is a twist that doesn't make any logical sense, because you cannot put a latex mask on somebody and look exactly like them, sound like them, and inherit their body shape when it's clearly being played by the same actress. So it I think, Tom, if you actually watch this movie, I think a lot of the movie, I think you can tell through a lot of the movie that they meant for Virginia to be the killer.
Yeah. Well, that would make sense, because I think, let's strip it back, keep it simple. You know, Ginny's had this brain operation. She's having blackouts. She's got the trauma from this birthday party years earlier. And when she blacks out, she kills people. And then she has this realization at the end that she's killed all these people, and she's recreated this birthday party with all the guests. It would have been fine. It would have been simple. You know, a few red herrings along the way. Nice reveal. Better red herrings than we actually got, hopefully. You know, it could have been all right, but this is just muddled nonsense. And the latex mask thing, you know, you can't even do that now with that sort of... You know, disregarding body shape and voice and all that, purely a latex mask of that quality. You know, maybe the best makeup artists in Hollywood can do things, but you know, you see it all the time. Full face makeup often just looks really fake, even now. So some girl has just managed to do this and pull it off completely convincingly. It is just rubbish.
I think it destroys a lot of the goodwill towards this movie that you can feel. If you happen to have liked what you've seen so far, and I happen to think that if the narrative was you know, was smoothed out a little bit more, if it was simpler, and I think if you'd cut it down to 90 minutes, you know, take 15-20 minutes out of this, I think it would have been a very serviceable slasher. But that ending, I'll say this much: I don't want to spoil it too much. But did you ever see a film called April Fool's Day?
A long time ago.
Mm-hmm. That film has a twist ending on it that I think works a lot better than this.
I think we've made our point with that. Overall, the film, I wouldn't say it's a complete waste of time. Some people might like it, actually, and it seems to be relatively well thought of, you know, looking down comments and so on. But I don't think I would sit through it again. It is too long, like you said. I did get bored with it, and... a few things kept me watching. You know, the kills were decent, but like you said, very quick. It was interesting to a degree, and it wasn't a complete waste of time, but I can't really recommend it.
No, it's difficult to recommend, like you say, but I'll say this. If you're curious about it, it might be worth giving it one watch, because I think you've got to see the ending, because the ending is, it is ridiculous. You won't quite believe what you're seeing, and it won't make sense to you. We've got a piece of feedback where somebody's actually asking, well, can we explain it to them? No, we can't. We don't know either. It just is something that happens. But it is difficult to yeah, it's difficult to recommend that you buy it because it doesn't accomplish what it said. It's very ambitious, but I think it ultimately failed.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is Happy Birthday to Me. If you want to buy the movie, in America the film can be purchased on Blu-ray as part of a double bill alongside the original When a Stranger Calls with Carol Kane. That is not a region-free Blu-ray release. So if you're in England, you'd have to have a region-free player. There's also a DVD available in the UK from Sony that was released in 2004. Avoid that release because it's got a horrible cover on it that doesn't reflect the movie whatsoever. And it contains the wrong score. It's got like a disco score that runs throughout it. If you can find the 2009 Anchor Bay DVD, that's probably the best one that you can get on DVD. You can also buy the film on Amazon as part of their instant video collection.
Good, okay. Well, I think that will finish us up on Happy Birthday to Me. And should we get to some feedback?
Yes, well, we've got quite a lot of feedback this week, in fact, and we begin with my friend and yours, Christopher Brown. He's taken time out of his busy schedule of complaining about everything on Twitter to send us a piece of audio feedback, as he always does. He watches the films alongside us, and we're very grateful for it. Christopher Brown, take it away.
Gentlemen, Christopher Brown here, journalist, author, cultural attaché. I wish to speak to you today, well, about both films, in fact. Happy Birthday to Me, for me personally, is interesting because it shares similarities to a film that was made at exactly the same time. A film that's on the Video Nasties list, in fact, called Madhouse. Now, both of them have this kind of birthday theme to them, and there's a party scene, shall we say. And if you put them side by side, there are very strong similarities. So strong, in fact, that a lot of people say that one of them cribs off the other. Indeed, I think that Happy Birthday to Me might have took a bit of the audience away from Madhouse. The reality is, it's complete coincidence. They're completely separate and made at the same time without any knowledge of what the other guy was doing. So I think that's always very interesting, the way those kind of things can happen, where two films have just come out at the same time, and the one that comes out first is effectively the winner of that. But what I really want to talk to you today is about Christmas Evil, which is one of my favourite festive horror films, if not one of my favourite Christmas films. It's a wonderful character piece with, at its heart, is a man you feel so sorry for, who has this really skewed look at the world, but you kind of feel like he's just so helpless. He tries so hard, and things just get worse and worse and worse for him, and he completely loses control of his life. And that's a real horrific thing for me, I always find it. You know, the good man that just stumbles and falls away and can't really manage in his life. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your views on this one. We keep on disagreeing on stuff, which is great. Actually, I really like that. One of the things I always love about podcasting is the way that no matter what you say, there's always a guy who's listening, who always comes back and kind of says, "You're completely wrong. This guy's amazing." Particularly with the Jess Franco stuff, where you can easily dismiss it, but there are armies of these incredible fans who love it. If I'm allowed to, can I just do a quick pimp as well for a podcast that's sitting on the Gentleman Grindhouse Records website, or will be soon anyway. It is the Night Gallery Podcast Christmas Special, which I've just recorded. It's the first Night Gallery podcast I've done in 2 years, and it is brand new, and it's not about the Night Gallery. It's about a film called A Carol for Another Christmas, a Lost Serling Christmas special that has very strong links to A Christmas Carol, but is incredibly bleak and not very festive, despite its obvious Christmas themes. If that's something that people would be interested in, please listen. And I've been trying to drum up support again from the old Twilight Zone network crowd. There is another point as well, that we keep on batting to and forth, and I wish to extend an olive branch to you, gentlemen. Perhaps we should bury the hatchet on this and no longer call me a fucking thief, because frankly, that's not very nice. And I won't keep on threatening you with court action for that. Although I will say this after listening to the last episode. Snitches get stitches, lads. Don't forget. But anyway, as I say, let us raise a glass, enjoy Christmas time, and I look forward to many more of your podcasts next year. Take care. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Good. Another good piece of feedback there from our friend Christopher Brown. And we agree on one for once. You know, we tend to disagree with him sometimes, which is fine. But he's a fan of Christmas Evil, which is good. But he said something about us calling him a fucking thief or something. I can't really remember what he's talking about, to be honest. No. But you know, he said something about burying the hatchet. I didn't realise there was anything to bury, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll bury the hatchet in his face, Tom. Right in his face. No, actually, let's be honest. He's a good friend of the show, and it is Christmas time, isn't it?
It is.
So let's raise the flag of peace. We're okay with you now, Chris Brown. And thank you very much for the feedback. You have always stuck with us. You send us something every time we release an episode, and we're happy to have you alongside us. And even though I feel that you probably are a thief, I'm willing to overlook it because you're a good man. So thank you very much, Chris Brown. Yay. Now, Tom, we have some email feedback to get to. We got a lot of stuff to get through, so we're going to move through it fairly quickly. We got an email from a guy named Seth McKevlin. Tom, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, let's do it. Seth from Dallas, Texas. I used to live in Texas. Seth says, Chris and Tom, greetings from Texas. I love the Strange and Deadly show. I wanted to give you some feedback for the last few movies you've covered. Good stuff. Okay, he says, Pigs. I'm surprised that Tom didn't mention his love for Somebody's Waiting for You, the song from Pigs, after he expressed his love for Gangster Rock from Graduation Day. It wasn't so much the song that I loved, it was the scene, but Somebody's Waiting for You, it's one of those annoyingly catchy ones, isn't it? You just can't help but sort of get it stuck in your head, but it's sort of annoying at the same time.
How does it go? Like, somebody's waiting for you. Something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll dig it up for you and send you a link. Okay, he says, I have to admit the song from Pigs was very annoying at first, but grew on me after hearing it about 6 times throughout the movie. Also, the final reveal scene of Pigs was not mentioned, and I thought it was pretty cool. Does he mean the twist, do you think, where she makes it look like she's been eaten by the pigs, but she's actually went to kill another day elsewhere?
Yeah, and she picks up a guy, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. He says, Brutes and Savages, I refuse to watch any more of this movie than I can help since I really can't take any animal killings, but I also found a free copy and took a quick look. I must say that the soundtrack is very cool actually. The restoration did it no favours, however, as it simply looks too clean to be a grimy Mondo movie in this condition. Also, the crocodile scene was priceless with the insert shots from a swimming pool, and that has to be seen to be believed. It's a good point, actually. Sometimes you can clean something up too much, you know. But I think even in a grimy version of it, I'd have felt the same. Okay, then about the 2 films that we've talked about this week. Christmas Evil. Wow, wish I had the DVD with director's commentary, since someone has a lot of explaining to do. I was hoping for a big payoff at the end of this one, but never quite got it. Weird ending, though. I have no idea what happened there. Well, we've given our thoughts on it. Hopefully that'll make some sense to you, Seth.
Yeah, it's realistic.
Yeah. Happy birthday to me. I know I've seen this before, but completely forgot who the killer was. It's well made, at least, and the DVD I have looks great. The ending to this was also confusing, and I'm looking forward to your explanation of it. Yeah, we're with you on that one, mate. And just for the record, I hate whodunit slashers. Christmas Evil's psychotic rampage killer was more to my liking. If he'd only gone on a balls-out rampage, then we'd really have something. Looking forward to a bit of Carpenter next time round when you cover The Thing. He's my favourite director. Good choice. Keep up the great work, guys. Seth from Dallas, Texas. Good. New friends of the show. Thank you, Seth. Appreciate it, mate. Chiming in on the movies, that's what we want.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I have to say, if you hate whodunit slashers, you're kind of missing out on. Be interested to know why. You're kind of missing out on a bunch of cool stuff there. Like most Yallows whodunits. So be interested to know why you don't like them. But yeah, thanks very much, Seth, and please do continue to write in the future because we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And you've got one from our old friend Jake in Ohio, haven't you?
Yeah, Jake from Ohio, who we have discovered thanks to this email, is our friend Dr. Roboculus, who left a iTunes review for us. But let's read the email. Right away, I wanted to say that I meant no offence in my last email and was just, as you said, getting into the spirit of the show and just having some fun. Of course, I have great respect for both of you. I didn't mean to stir up controversy in the studio, but I'm glad that I was able to bring both of you a little closer to each other by insulting one of you.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I feel incredibly close to Tom at this precise moment. I want to type the things to you that I was saying to myself while I was watching Christmas Evil. Mostly, what the fuck? And, huh? I didn't dislike this movie. I was just expecting a horror movie, and this is more of a thriller. Well, I think we agree with that, don't we, Tom?
Absolutely.
Actually, I found myself interested and waiting to see what was going to happen. I guess this movie is a precursor to Silent Night, Deadly Night. I think Christmas Evil did it better. If I had to describe this movie to someone who's never seen it, I would call it the Taxi Driver of Santa Claus movies. I think that's a great point.
Absolutely.
So are we to understand that Harry seeing his mum and dad have sex is what scarred him for life and made him a murderous weirdo obsessed with Santa Claus? Well, I guess if anything would do it to a person, it would be that. And was he trying to slit his wrist there as a child in the beginning? Because Santa's not real? Because his mum is cheating on his dad with Santa? Because Santa is just an arsehole? That wasn't too clear for me. But I'm sure you two fellas will have some ideas to set me straight. I was a bit confused with the way he killed the 3 random people in front of the church, especially since he was so angry at his boss, who was just a few feet away. And he seemed to do more damage to the houses of the nice kids than he did to the naughty kid. He didn't even go inside the naughty kid's house, he just set dirt outside the house on top of more dirt. He fucking trashed the first house he went into, cutting open their presents and shit. I'm reading it the way Jake wrote it, by the way, folks. There were times watching this where you might think you're just watching a normal Christmas movie too. By the end of it, I was really rooting for Harry. Hear, hear. I wanted him to win, and I guess he did at the end, at least in his mind. I find it more fun to take the ending literally and expect a middle-aged guy in a cargo van to pull up next to my house this Christmas Eve. All in all, I have to admit that I enjoyed this movie, and the actor who played Harry did a fair job, considering he had to play crazy in a room all by himself a lot. I assume that can't be an easy thing to do and not end up looking like a goofy ass. I guess the fact that I was yelling, "Go Harry," at the part when the mob was chasing him means he was a good enough actor to make me want to give him a hug. Also, I like the stuff about playing the right notes. I got the tune now. Yeah, we never mentioned that, did we? But that is... He says that a couple of times in the movie, doesn't he? I'm playing the right notes, as if he's finally woken up to the idea of what he needs to do.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, guys, keep up the good work. Really happy to hear that this is a long-term project. Love it all. By the way, I'm the one you call Dr. Roboculus. I just wanted to make sure I got credit for that and to prove my allegiance to the show. Bloody as always, Jake from Ohio.
Good. Great stuff. Dr. Roboculus revealed. Thanks, Jake.
Dr. Ridiculous. Thank you so much, Jake. It's really nice to hear from you, and please continue to write in.
Okay, one more piece of feedback from an old friend of both of our old shows, I think, Neil Tidbury from Brighton. And he says, "Ahoy, hoy, gents. Thought it was about time I dropped you a little bit of feedback. I could say it was time because you're now up and running, but I think it would be fair to say you hit the ground running and haven't stopped yet. Furthermore, picking up where Chris, the thieving Tinker Brown, left off, by dipping your toe into the shallow end of the Video Nasties pool, is a bold move. I thought there was some shite on that list, but what you guys are going to have to endure in the coming months and years is quite the catalogue of crap. You'd think starting off with Cannibals it could only be up from there, but man alive, I salute you, sirs. Granted, there are some gems, but it's the crap that's fun. Anywho, enough of the backslapping. Interesting to see how Happy Birthday to Me holds up, as my only memory of it was watching it at a house party and subsequently copping off with an accommodating young lady, and thereby wiping my memory of the film, except for vague recollections of weightlifting paraphernalia and the old family fun area. Good choice, you know, if you've got a choice between a lady and Happy Birthday to Me, I'd choose the lady as well. He says, again, great to have you back doing what you do best, or if you do other things better, at least doing this better than most. Cheers, Neil from Brighton. Cheers, Neil.
Thanks very much. And that's Tids71 in the Twitterverse. That's TIDS71. Go give him a follow on Twitter. Now, you said that was the final piece of feedback here, Tom, and we said in the last episode we're not going to read iTunes reviews because first of all, it seems a bit egotistical of us to say, like, here's all our latest iTunes reviews, and it would take up a lot of time. But we've got a brand new review on, I think it's the UK iTunes from someone named Ash Dev. And the reason I bring this up is because he makes a point at the end of his comment that I feel I need to sort of address. Yeah, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but most of the comment is very positive, isn't it, Tom? It's talking about, he thinks we've got an interesting approach. He says that it's a revelation. A couple of podcasts that deal with the ban list, but what he's hearing with us is some films he's never heard of before. He likes the production values and that we contextualise the films for him. And so there's some really positive stuff there. And thank you very much, Ashdev. I don't know your real name, of course, but thank you very much for leaving that. I'm really happy that you like it. And it's a 5-star review, isn't it? So we can't complain about it. But there's one thing he said towards the end that I feel I have to comment on. And what he did is he spread his iTunes comment out into good points and bad points. And the one bad point at the bottom, as you can imagine, has something to do with me. I just want to read this. It says, the humour can be a bit juvenile, well, Goreboy to be exact. However, the lapses are infrequent and don't detract from the finished article. First of all, I'm glad that they don't detract. I have to say, it makes me sad if somebody considers the humour that I bring to the show to be lapses in any way, because that implies that it's a flaw. I have to say this about it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. At the end of the day, I knew going into this show, Tom and I have very different styles, don't we?
Yeah. The odd couple of podcasting in a lot of ways.
And so far I think it's worked very well. But we do have different styles. Now, here's the thing about juvenile humour. I do think that people who have a silly sense of humour, it's very easy to categorise that kind of humour as juvenile. Look, I'm a 31-year-old man. I'm going to be 32 next year. I've had one hell of a year. If you guys, I'm not going to... It's on my Twitter, if you ever look up, sometimes I post about it, something to do with my father. I've had a hell of a bad year. Quite frankly, if I'm able to still laugh at all, it's something of a miracle. There are as an adult, there are a lot of responsibilities that we have, whether it's working a job, paying bills, looking after our family, keeping things together. And I handle all those responsibilities the way that anyone should, the way that Tom does, the way that anybody does. However, I've always believed, ever since I was a kid, and moving on forwards from that growing up is overrated. I like to think that I'm a big kid at heart, really. And I'm quite happy about that, because if you can't laugh at yourself, if you can't be silly, what else have you got in life? If you don't want to bring laughter to other people, what is it? What are you, To me, it says that you're a little bit soulless. Now, the juvenile, style humour is not going to be for everybody. I knew that. So I'm just glad, Ash, that you're still listening to the show, that you still like it, that you can look past that. Of course, it saddens me that you don't like my brand of humour that I bring to it. I try to bring intelligent points to it, but if I don't, then I'm sorry for that. But I'm never going to be sorry for bringing that kind of humour, because that is what I do. I'm a silly person. One of the reasons I have the girlfriend in my life that I do is because we're both goofy, silly people. And so I hope that you stick with us. But I just wanted to comment on that because it's kind of important that I contextualise exactly why I do it. I don't want to be a 31-year-old who's aware of the fact that he's 31 and therefore can't laugh about himself. And we talk about penis jokes and all the sort of stupid, naughty things. I say, well, I grew up loving Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson and a lot of bawdy British comedy. So for me, that's all a part of it. So like I said, thank you very much for the comment. Most of it was very positive, and we're very grateful for it. But I just hope you carry on listening, and that my humour doesn't become a distraction, because it's always going to be there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we are quite different in our approaches to podcasting, you and I, and just for me personally, I appreciate the humour that you bring to it. I'm often on the other end of it, which is fine because we're mates, and that's the way we've always been. My style of podcasting is very somber. I remember a review of the Twilight Zone podcast once that called it very sober, and it was a positive review as well, but it was just called it very sober, and that that's the way I roll. So I think I appreciate the balance of that humour that you bring to it, because it lightens up in a way that I see it as a talent. I see it as a plus. It's a talent that I don't have. I don't have that ability to be funny. And juvenile. There's juvenile and there's juvenile. I still think there's a sort of a sharpness and a wit to the way you do it that I appreciate. It's not just saying cock for the sake of it and expecting people to laugh. Well, not all the time, but
I think the last cock mention definitely was that. But
yeah, definitely was that. But so that's that's my input in it. But I'm glad you enjoy the show, Ash Dev, and so stick with us, mate, and thanks for your feedback on iTunes. Appreciate it. Okay, so that's the end of this fortnight's show. Happy birthday to me and Christmas Evil. We hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I am Grindhouse Tom on Twitter, and Chris is the Gore Boy, or you can get to us on our Strange Deadly Twitter account as well. And if you want to, I'm really happy that we're getting this feedback through. I think it adds a lot of colour to the show. Yeah. And if you want to send an MP3 clip or an email, then it's feedback@strangeanddeadly.com.
Yeah, what we love is that some people are actually watching the films along with us. So that's brilliant, because we get to hear your point of view. And at the end of the day, we make the show not only for us, but also for you. So yeah, feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. Do write to us and let us know what you think of the show and what you think of the films that we're talking about. Now, we have to let you know that this is indeed the last episode of 2014. We're taking a bit of an extended break to account for Christmas and also the New Year, making sure we pull Tom off the floor, because undoubtedly he's going to be completely hungover after New Year's Eve. So I have to get him upright and get a microphone in front of him again. So the next show will be released on January 9th of next year. And we can reveal that the first episode of the new year will feature an alien theme, and the films we'll be covering are The Thing and Extro. And yes, we're talking about John Carpenter's classic remake, The Thing, and Extro I've never seen before.
I've not either. I'm actually friends on Facebook with Tim Dry, the guy who plays the alien in Extro. So I'll be interested to see it.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to say much about The Thing, do we, mate? I think that's one of our favourite films, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
A real horror classic, so that's going to be a pleasure. So yeah, look out for us on the 9th of January next year. Until then, folks, what else can we say? Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you. Thanks a lot for supporting us as we get this thing going. I think it means a lot to us, and we're going to do our best for you. We're going to carry on through 2015, reviewing a bunch of really bad movies probably, but hopefully some gems in there as well.
Absolutely. Happy Christmas, and we will see you in the new year. Have a good one.
Bye for now, folks. At the factory, his co-workers are fairly dismissive of him. At the factory, his co-workers are fairly dismissive. See, here we go. It's going to be one word that's going to keep me held up all bloody day. Fairly dismissive. Dismissive. I don't think there's any way I can say this word and not sound...
Why does your voice go like that when you say it?
I don't know. Maybe I should just say it like that and leave it.
Go on.
Okay. Now, let me give you two other quick pieces of trivia here before we move on to telling you about how you can actually get this film, and you should get it. If you think Harry's brother Philip looks rather familiar, it's probably because he's played by actor Jeffrey DeMunn. Now, you may be hearing that name and thinking, that sounds familiar. This time watching it, I was looking at it. Oh, God.
As the member of the top 10 are being whittled down, Jimmy. As the members of the top 10 are... As the members of the top 10 are being... Good. One more piece of feedback from an old friend of both of our shows, I think, from back in the day. Bye, guy. I'm not casting any aspersions.
No,
Neil.
we don't know what your sexual preferences are, Neil. Shame on you, Tom.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they are. Okay, Neil Tidbury. Sorry,
bye, guy.
Right. Okay. Shall I do all of that again or what? I don't know. We got away with some of it. Okay, Neil says, ahoy hoy gents. I thought it was about time I dropped you a little bit of feedback.
Actually, sorry, Tom, we actually didn't even say his name.
Didn't we?
Because I think he said Neil Tie Guy or something. So we'll start.
Bye Guy.
Yeah, we'll start again. Yeah, Neil Bye Guy. So we'll start again from. I've got a piece of feedback from our old friend. Yeah.
Okay, at least you got a blooper anyway.